Hey, we want to welcome everybody to You and the Law podcast show. We want to thank everybody for being patient with us tonight. We had a few little technical issues with Chief Swag. We're gonna blame it on Chief Swag, Chief Hill.
Okay.
Hey, Chief Swag, man, you done went into the dark, so you got to come out. You got to come to the light.
Move to your left. There you go.
Yeah.
That man right there.
Yeah, man. You know, this is what happens when people get older, man. Jay, this is what happens.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And I don't have any of my grandkids around to show me how to work all this stuff.
Good, man. Well, hey, we want to thank you for taking the time out of your afternoon, man, to come on and join us. We've got a topic that, you know, we hope it's not something that we would like to talk about, but as you know, Jay, it's something that has happened more times than what it should have. And so, you know, we want to welcome everybody to You and the Law podcast. And we want to remind you that if you got any questions, ask your questions in the chat. We'll see them pop up and we'll get right to them. And tonight, guys, we're going to be, the topic is our search for answers after mass shootings. And so, as everyone know about the tragic mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, just a week after the shooting in Buffalo, New York, we have another 18-year-old who has committed another horrible crime. So, guys, before we jump into the topic, I want to flip over and play something real quick for our listeners. So just bear with me and I will be right back. So hold on just a second. Let me find this audio clip.
Our KHOU 11 Investigates team is tracking how this all unfolded. We're joined by Jeremy Rogowski. And Jeremy, the big questions for people right now: what do we know about the gunman and how he got his weapon?
Well, Ron, state officials say Salvador Ramos was a high school dropout with no known adult criminal history, and he bought the guns legally just last week, the week of his 18th birthday. Salvador Ramos purchased an AR platform rifle from a local gun store last Tuesday, 375 rounds of ammunition Wednesday, and another AR-style rifle Friday, according to the ATF. Yesterday morning, officials said Ramos posted 3 messages on Facebook, the only known warning of what was to happen.
I'm going to shoot my grandmother. I shot my grandmother. I'm going to shoot an elementary school.
Officials say the grandmother was able to call 911 as Ramos drove a few blocks towards Robb Elementary, where he crashed this pickup truck in a ditch about 100 yards away and headed toward his school back door. Authorities say a Uvalde school resource officer briefly confronted Ramos before the suspect went down 2 short hallways and into 2 adjoining classrooms, where he shot and killed 19 children and 2 teachers. More police arrived shortly after, and a Border Patrol agent, officials say, killed the suspect. Inside the school, authorities recovered 7 30-round magazines, as well as a backpack with even more ammo just outside the back door. And according to a law enforcement briefing to state lawmakers, the suspect was wearing a tactical vest, but it did not have any body armor inside that vest. Investigators, meanwhile, still don't have an answer into the biggest question so many are asking: what was the motive for this heinous crime? Ray?
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, you know, I think, you know, Jay, since this story has broke, so many things have, so many inaccurate information has been shared with the public by the Texas Department of Public Safety, by the local law enforcement. And in that video, you know, you heard him say that the gunman was briefly encountered by a school resource officer or somebody at the school, which now we know that's not that did not take place. So, man, I think this is something that this community is going to have to be dealing with for a very long time. And unfortunately, Jay, you've got some parents who were pleading and begging with officers to go inside of that school while this shooting was take place.
That's what I heard also. And Chief, you know as well as I do, doing this job for decades that we have been, that it's easy to critique when you're sitting in your recliner at home or behind your board. I think this, unfortunately, this won't be the last one. We all know that there's copycats out there, and I think the news channels are partially responsible for all the confusion. I think news channels want to be the first person to break the story, and sometimes when they do that, I feel that they don't have all the facts. They just want to be first.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And Jay, and you make a good point about, we were not there. We're just going off of what we're seeing on the news and what's being reported. And there's been some cell phone video footage that has been shown by the parents who were there. So, and Keith, jump in on this here. I think, what do you think about the misinformation that is being put out there in the last couple of days?
Well, good evening, everybody. Chief,
Good evening.
Chief, how you doing? So, let me just say this, man. There's two things our focus should be on: the families of these children, and what we can do to stop this type of violence from occurring. Right now, that's the only two things. Take the politics out of it. We gotta think about these families and how do we prevent or minimize the chance for happening again. And it's just like the chief said. Unfortunately, we're gonna have another one, and that's just the way it is. Not if, but when. And the reason why I think the citizens or the listeners need to understand why I say that is because think about all the ones that we've had, and you have copycats. And it's just like the chief said, you're going to have somebody who wants to outdo somebody. And, at the end of the day, whether that person commits suicide or he's killed by police or he's arrested, they literally, when they have this much hate in their hearts, or they have this serious form of mental illness, they really don't care. And how do you shock the soul of a nation? You kill a child.
Kill a child.
And so not only did he kill 19 kids and 2 teachers, and then there were a lot of other children and people injured, but he shot his grandmother. And so there was something there. Chiefs, the problem that I have with this whole situation is that there were indicators.
Mm-hmm.
There were indicators. I mean, you talk to his high school classmates, you talk to his family, you talk to his neighbors. There were indicators, just like going back to Buffalo, indicators. I don't think there has been a mass shooting that has had deaths that there hasn't been indicators there related to the shooter. So
they all like to boast what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, remember the Las Vegas shooter. Nobody still to this day have a clue why he did what he did. Nobody. I don't believe, unless there's something that's come out, but I think the Las Vegas shooter, that mass shooting right there, he didn't leave behind any kind of information.
Hey, there was some information out there, Virgil, and it was that this guy And Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently this guy in Vegas, basically there were some personal issues there with him. I can't remember if he had lost all of his money. I can't remember, but there were some personal issues there that were going on with him. I don't think I'm sorry, go ahead, Chief.
The news reported he was a big gambler.
Yeah. And there was something going on. So I don't know if this guy had lost all of his money or something, but there was some personal issues going on with him financially.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up some information, and according to what the FBI, stated that early in the investigation, that they couldn't find a motive related to the shooting. I know he had some gambling issues. He had a lot of money, but he was a man who, once again, planned a mass shooting. He did everything up into barricading the door because he knew that law enforcement would breach that. They would find where he was at and they would breach that door.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chief. Go ahead.
No, guys, I'll tell you, it's when you have someone, you have this. These guys telegraph what they're going to do, and I believe that when you have someone who telegraphs what they're doing, and people know, I think the people who know are complicit, man.
Absolutely, Chief. Absolutely.
I think they're complicit, man. I mean, it's as though, well, they're not serious. And if we haven't had enough of these incidents to indicate that people are serious, and the fact of the matter is that we're going to have more. There's 100. We had 200 mass shootings in the nation this year already.
I know there's been 27 mass shootings. There's been 27 school shootings so far this year.
But there's been 190 something based on the definition of mass shootings that the FBI has provided. There's been 193 so far this year.
Correct. Yeah.
And there's been 193. So, man, I don't get it. And so, but then let's talk about a whole different aspect of this thing, man. Now we're hearing, so I can't say because I don't know if it's been confirmed yet. Now we're hearing that the first responders were going in actually saving their children, and it took an hour for first responders to enter the school. Now I'm going to say this. I understand your priority, your children. But let me ask y'all this. Am I missing something with active shooter? Was active shooter not developed that as soon as you get on, at least two people get on scene, that you immediately go in and address the threat? I mean, am I missing something?
I no, you're not. And I've told every one of my officers, if there is a school shooting or a shooting at a Dollar General, and if you show up and you're the only person there and you can eliminate that threat, then do it. We're paid to put our lives on the line. We that's what we do.
Well,
we stand on the wall, Chief. We stand on that wall.
We do, Chief, and I'll tell you this too. Before I retired, I kept a flap jacket. I kept a vest, a vest and extra magazines in my car and my radio. And if there had been any situation, active shooter, I'm going to throw that vest on and I'm going to immediately go in and address that situation.
And I don't care where I'm at in the United States.
Absolutely. So it's going to be interesting, but we got to figure out a way to stop it. And on both sides of the aisle, I've told people this. I don't care if you're Democrat, don't care if you're Republican, moderate. let's figure out a way we all got to put our heads together and figure how we minimize this. We got to stop this. It's a
Chief
Democrat
Green,
Republican.
we are in the business of saving lives.
Absolutely.
That's what we did.
Yeah.
I entered this job in 1988 to do exactly that. And I know each one of you guys have done that also. And that's what we do. We preserve life. And
Right.
if it cost us our lives, then that's we signed on the dotted line. We signed the contract, just like in the Marine Corps. We signed the contract
Yeah.
to protect life and property. Period.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna say this, Jay. Let's go back to what took place in Buffalo. You had a retired Buffalo officer working in that grocery store as a security officer. He took on the threat, and he fired at that suspect, even though it didn't have an impact. But he did what he needed to do to save the lives of those people in the store. And so, Chief Humphrey, you mentioned about the politics. I think people are so fed up with this conversation about politics. Ever since Columbine, ever since every shooting, even Sandy Hook, every politician always comes out and says, hey, our thoughts and prayers are with the family. Our thoughts and prayers, whatever we can do, we're there for you. But you're not. Because again, there has been so many kids have been killed from mass shootings. And you would seem to think that you got these politicians, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican, stop bringing up the fact that my colleagues on the other aisle won't do this. My colleagues on the other aisle won't do that. Because at the end of the day, I hate to say this, but if one of these senators, kids or grandkids, were involved in one of these shootings, they would be standing on the floor of the House or the Senate introducing a bill so quick to make sure that these things would not happen again. It has not hit home for these guys. And that is a problem that so many parents and other people are saying. It has not hit home. And it really gets me when you got guys like Ted Cruz and all these other comes on TV about, hey, it's the Democrats. And then you got the Democrats come on saying it's the Republicans. I think people are tired of that, guys.
Yeah, I extremely agree with that statement, Chief. It's not that issue. It's a protection of life issue. And that's what we do. We are supposed to protect life, correct?
Yes, we are.
And we do that at all cost. I mean, we get paid money to put our lives on the line, and most of us don't ever have to do that. But when that time comes, it's time to check in and punch in and do that.
Yeah. Hey, guys, we got some comments that are coming in and want to get to some of them. One of them, probably see up on the screen. It's retired captain from OCPD, Captain Norris. He says, this was an active shooter, not a barricaded subject. A barricade can become active, but once the shooter starts, it will never become a barricade. Make immediate entry, find the shooter, neutralize, and eliminate. You're absolutely right, Captain. I mean, and that's why so many people are asking the questions. Why were so many law enforcement officers outside? Why this gunman was still inside of that classroom? And they actually started, one parent, she was handcuffed. So why was there, again, there's so many questions that still need to be answered, but you didn't see people running into the building, into that school like we've seen in other mass shootings.
And that's what we should be doing, Chief, is we run toward danger. we are the last line of defense. If no one's going to charge that building, then who is? I'll you know, I've told all my officers, if you need to go in by yourself to eliminate a threat and protect life, then do it. If you have that, then do it.
Exactly. Hey, Chief Humphrey, we lost your audio.
Yeah, Chief.
To the point of cowardice, every police officer that stood around and didn't do anything should be fired. If it comes down to cowardice, you know, or if it comes down to a supervisor who told these officers not to go in, then heads should roll over that. I'm telling you, heads should roll.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna say this: you had you had border patrol agents there who had the firepower. So this shouldn't come down to a conversation or a debate over. Well, we didn't have that type of style of assault weapon. So you had local law enforcement, you had border patrol, federal border patrol agents there. So somebody at some point is going to have to just come out and say, this Uvalde Police Department, whoever they were, dropped the ball because they did not enter into that school when they should have.
Well, let me tell you this. It doesn't matter if you have a revolver. It doesn't matter if you got a shotgun. Man, you go. That is what the active shooter situation is about.
Yeah.
That is what the training, we've gone through training, man. We've talked about that. It has been beat into our heads. When you have a active shooter situation, if it's only one officer, you go in and you immediately address the threat. Now you telling me that you had a retired officer in Buffalo that addressed the threat immediately, and unfortunately he lost his life.
I think I lost you again.
Lost you, Chief.
Let me send him a message.
Chief, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Yeah. I just sent him a message, Jay. Just told him no sound.
Well, let me piggyback on that before Chief Humphreys can rejoin us, and that is exactly right. If you don't want to put your life on the line, and you know, I understand. If you don't want to put your life on the line, then don't take the oath and raise your right hand and do that, because unfortunately that's what's required sometimes, is that you rush in and you save life. If you're not willing to do that, then please don't apply. We want to save people, but we want people that are doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Right, Chief Green?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I want to get to another comment here, Jay, from one of our people that's tuned in with us. Tony Hollis says, the very reason why the police should push back on the NRA obtaining an assault weapon for 18-year-olds is legal, opposed to 18-year-olds buying a can of beer. So,
well, let me, I got a strong opinion on this, Chief Green.
Yeah, go right ahead.
You know, states, individual, we have 50 states in the United States.
Yeah.
And each state establishes their rules for obtaining a firearm.
Correct.
In Oklahoma, it's 21. You have to be 21 years old to carry a handgun. So you have to be 21 years old minimum to be a police officer in the state of Oklahoma.
Correct.
And and 21 is a very young age to be putting on the responsibilities like that, to take
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
So I think that each state needs to look at their regulations for owning a hand. I mean, 18 years old to own an AR-15 or an M4 or any kind of assault weapon. Maybe that's too young.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a politician.
Well, Jay, let me say this.
It's an assault rifle. I used it in war.
Yeah,
It's a very destructive weapon.
it is. Well, I'm gonna say this, Jay. Kenneth Baker brings up a very good point, and this is something that I've heard even watching the news since the shooting happened. To rent a car, you have to be 25 years old to rent a car. So how is it that, you got to be 25 years old to rent a car,
Yeah.
but you can only be in the state of Texas, even in the state of Texas, guys, you got to be 25 years old to rent a car at any major car rental place. But in the state of Texas and some other states, you can only be, once you turn 18, you can go and you can buy these type of high capacity weapons. But you cannot go into a store and purchase a 6-pack of beer, nor can you go into Applebee's or Red Lobster and sit down and have dinner with your family and drink alcohol. So, I mean, when we talk about passing laws, why is it that we've got laws like that, but we've got laws to where if you want a handgun, if you want an assault rifle, you can go buy one?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, I think
You can buy an M4, but you can't buy a 6-pack of Budweiser.
Yeah, exactly. Something wrong. Go ahead, Chief Swag.
Hey man, this is the deal, man. There's so many different components here, man. We're talking about mental illness, we're talking about violence, people who are intending violence, we're talking about gun rights, and so I'm a Second Amendment guy. I totally believe that people have a right to buy guns.
And I am too, Chief.
Oh yeah.
I'm a Second Amendment guy. I believe in that. But what I don't understand is the Brady bill was passed after Reagan was shot, named after I think Jim Brady.
Hey, Keith, let me say this real quick. That bill was passed very quickly. Bill was passed very quickly.
Very quickly.
Different time, Chiefs. That
Huh?
that was a very different time in the country, though.
Yeah, you're right, Jay.
You are absolutely right. And what I don't get is, why is there a problem with saying, okay, we need a database to determine who's mental, so we can stop those individuals that have mental illness, and I'm talking about the high levels of mental illness. We can make sure that straw purchases don't take place. We can also, let's look at these laws that say if you steal a gun from a car, if you steal a gun, let's enhance that penalty. I think those are the type of things that we need to really look at that don't violate people's, because when we're talking about those three types of things, those don't go in line with the Second Amendment. They don't. And so stealing a gun to commit a crime, that's not in line with the Second Amendment. Someone who's diagnosed with a mental illness and schizophrenia, that there is a potential that they could use a weapon to commit an horrific crime, that's not in line with the Second Amendment. And and things like that. So why don't we? Those are two things I think that we could do to help. Now we got to realize, man, we got to do something. And if both sides don't come together on anything else, they got to come together on gun laws.
Absolutely, Chief.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If I don't care if you don't want to, I don't care if you don't agree with Biden. I don't care if you didn't agree with Trump. I don't care if you do agree with Trump or Biden. I don't care. We got to come together, man. This is not a us versus them. This is all of us. I don't get it. And you know what? Because there's never been, let me say this. There's never been a single gun that has ever killed anyone. There has been a person that has been in possession of that gun that has either hurt somebody or killed somebody.
Yeah.
A gun is,
Guns don't. People kill people.
People kill people. It's a tool used by people to kill people. So I don't know, man. I'm just.
You're never going to eliminate evil.
No.
In the world, Chief. Evil will always exist.
Absolutely.
And people like thousands of people, officers men and women that have stepped up and said, you know what? I raised my right hand. I will take that oath and I will defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well,
Keith.
let me ask y'all this. Do you think as a nation and as law enforcement and as politicians, do you think there's a clear and concise understanding of what domestic terrorism is?
No, I do not. I personally, no.
Yeah. No, because again, you get into that debate about now you're starting putting labels on certain people, and people don't want to do that. I mean, when you talk about domestic terrorism, when you start talking about, white supremacy groups, and you start talking about all these other groups, people don't want to have that conversation, but they will come out and get very engaged with these type of conversations about these mass shootings. And I have to say this, and I think there are so many politicians who the three of us will never fully, we will never fully understand the pain that these parents are feeling in Uvalde, or we will never feel the pains of the families in Buffalo. We just won't. And so I want to ask you these questions, Jay and Keith, and even to those who are listening to us. How can you stand up and continue to say, we are with you? We pray, our prayers are with you. I mean, you've got the family, and there are so many families in Uvalde, Texas, who never thought that they would have to bury their children, and they don't even have the finances to do that.
You don't drop your kids off at school thinking they're not going to come home again.
No. And so, I think it's time. These tough conversations have been had, because I went back, guys, and I listened to the parents from Sandy Hook. I listened to the parents from, Colorado, Columbine, all the other mass shootings, and you just hear they're just, words cannot describe. And then every single president has had to deal with talking about this here, but you got the same politicians who are sitting in office and they're not doing anything. And so at what point what can we do?
We Chief, that's a great question, Chief Green. That is great question. What can we do?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you from the feelers I have put out with my constituents, do better. Do better.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to do better, and that is communication, personnel, interagency communication, and statewide communication. That's how we can do better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now because I spent a little bit working a year with the Tulsa Public School campus police department. Probably one of the best in the state of Oklahoma when it comes to school safety.
I agree.
Where
I agree.
you cannot get into any public school in the city of Tulsa unless you are let in by somebody within that office. Uh, the dispatch center has the capability of locking down doors, and so the technology is there. And so when our topic tonight is our search for answers after mass shootings, and I think when we talk about the safety of schools, there are several schools who have some very high-tech technology in their schools to prevent these type of things from happening. And so when we go back to Sandy Hook, there was a conversation about more funding for schools to prevent these things from happening. So here we are, some 12 to 15 years later, 12 years later, and every single school should have this type of high technology that will prevent. I don't care if you're in a small rural community. I don't care if you're in Langston, Oklahoma, or if you're in Boley, Oklahoma, or Payton, Oklahoma. You got to make sure that your school is the most safest building in your community.
Or in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Yeah. But the simple fact that if banks can be safe, why can't schools be safe?
Well, we're going to protect our borders. How about we protect our school?
Well, Jay, you bring up a good point. Keith, Jay's going to say, if we're going to protect our borders, why can't we protect our schools? And I'm all for border protection, but stop putting so much money into trying to keep people out of the country and start putting the money in the school systems to where people will feel safe. I mean,
for people like all of us three chiefs, we're all within 5 years of age. We need that next generation, chiefs. We need next generation.
Keith is a little older, Jay.
I'm sorry.
The guy to your left over there, he's a little older. He's older than us.
No. Nothing but love, baby. Nothing but love.
Whatever.
Well, we are tasked with our protection of our cities, communities, and our schools. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to back up. We raised our right hand and we did the oath. And if we need to protect our schools, our citizens, and our communities with our oath, right? Right, Chiefs?
Yeah. You're absolutely right, Jay. And again, I want to let me just remind everybody, if you just now tuned into the podcast, you're listening to You and the Law podcast, and tonight topic is our search for answers after mass shootings. And we've got on a special guest is joining us, Chief Jay Hill. He's the police chief with the city of Langston, big town Langston, where Langston University is at, the only HBCU college in the state of Oklahoma. So, Jay, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah. So go ahead, Chief Swag.
Cheap swag.
Hey, man, he thinks he's got the swag, Jay, but
He does. He does, baby. He's in Little Rock.
so I want to go back to what are we, probably 72 hours past the shooting in Uvalde, Texas, and there are still, the families there are still searching for answers. Why didn't police go into the building? Why were they outside, basically pleading and everything that they could think of to get those officers to go inside of that school? And so you got to ask yourself this question, Jay. First of all, why was the school even accessible to this guy to get inside of the school?
Well, I'm not real familiar with Uvalde, but
It's a small, Jay. It's a real small community, about 90 miles from San Antonio. So it's in a rural. It's not a small city, but it's small. So I mean, it's kind of close to the border of Texas and Mexico. So that's why you had Border Patrol agents there.
And when Chief Green, I know you and you know me. When people say they need help, we run toward chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's extremely important in this current climate, that new people need to know when you're entering this profession, Chief, that it's service before self. And I think everybody needs to know that you need to put yourself before the citizens in your community.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, Jay, there's a war going on in Ukraine, and you've got soldiers who are putting their lives on the line to save their communities.
Mm-hmm.
They're not running from the Russian soldiers. They're running towards the Russian soldiers. They're doing everything they can based upon their training to eliminate the threat. So you got to ask us, and let me go back to this, Jay. There are a lot of people who are just regular civilian citizens who are fighting alongside of soldiers in Ukraine who have no military training whatsoever. So you got to think about this. I listened to the news a couple of nights ago where a very wealthy Ukrainian is fighting alongside the soldiers in Ukraine. This man is a billionaire. So if a billionaire can put on body armor and fight alongside soldiers, what was wrong with these police officers in Uvalde, Texas, to not go into that school and use your training to eliminate the threat? And if the person was inside of this classroom, do everything you could to get inside of that classroom, because guys, we are hearing some very harrowing stories about how these kids' bodies were mangled, with just riddled with bullets. The fact that this 18-year-old just continued to shoot these innocent kids as they lay there dead. I mean, that is very hard to comprehend with. And I don't see how, if you are a police officer, that you can still want to be in this profession after knowing that these children suffered tremendously.
You can't, Chief. Yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah, they suffered tremendously, Jay. And the things that have happened since this shooting, Jay, one of the school teacher's husband, I saw earlier on the news, one of the news outlets where a camera crew caught him and maybe his father walking up to the memorial site in front of the school, laying down flowers. Hours later, this man dies from a heart attack. So now that family has lost their mother and their father.
Two people.
Two. And so as a politician, I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, where is the empathy and where is the conversation that says, you know what, instead of me going to the NRA convention this weekend in Houston, Texas, let me get my butt back to DC and let us get to work on how we can come up with some kind of legislation to stop 18-year-olds from getting weapons. That's what's important, Jay. That's what's really important. And I think I just can't understand how you cannot, Mitch McConnell, whoever you are, to say, well, everybody is publicizing this. Every time there's a mass shooting, you want to publicize it. You're not publicizing because this is happening more times than you can probably even remember. Jay, you and I know, man, there's been so many mass shootings, you can't remember them all.
Mm.
You can't. I mean,
Absolutely. No, you're right, Chief.
Yeah. And so, again, how do you honor, how do you remember these children? And how do you remember the families from Buffalo? How do you remember the other school shooting? And Jay, let me just go back. Let me say this here. When a father says, my son, for his birthday, I'm going to go and buy him a handgun. I'm going to go buy him either a Glock, I'm going to go buy him an assault weapon, whether he turns 15 or he turns 18. For a father to say, well, my son won't go out and do that. You don't know what your kids are going to go and do. So why would you put a handgun in the hands of a 15-year-old or a 15-year-old or an 18-year-old, Jay?
I obviously do not have a answer to that because you don't. You don't.
Well, no. And Jay, and I know we love Chief Swag, and hopefully he'll come back on and join us before the end of the show. But it was just several months ago, Jay, that there was another school shooting where we learned after the fact that the father went and purchased a son, who had just turned 15. He had purchased his son a handgun, and the son took the gun to school and shot and killed several students. Then the parents, they go off and they're running from law enforcement. Mm-hmm. So as a parent, if you're an educated man and you're going to sit there and think, well, you know what? Oh, Johnny says he wants a handgun for his birthday. I'm going to go to Academy Sports and buy him a handgun. But let me stop and think. Well, you know what? This other kid, his parents went and bought him a gun. So I'm not going to buy my son a gun. I mean, where do parents, where does that responsibility come in with the parents who are going out and buying these kids these guns? And Jay, there was a TikTok video that I sent to Chief Swag, and this was at a school, Jay. These were a group of very young African-American boys and girls, mostly boys. They were inside of a gym. They opened up a bag that had at least 4 or 5 different type of handguns one kid had an assault weapon in front of his pants, and this was some kind of maybe a basketball game or some kind of event going on. So they're posting this stuff to TikTok, and I've got to ask. I'm gonna ask you this question: have you ever been in Facebook jail? Because
No.
you so if you post something, and I don't know if Chief Norris is still, if Captain Norris is still on with us or not, but we've got quite a few questions that have come in. But how do you people make comments on Facebook and they get put in Facebook jail?
Mhm.
But you can post a video on TikTok and don't nothing happen to you. So hey, guys, let me get to some of the questions. We've had quite a few chats come in. Tony Hollis says, reply to Mike Norris. Mr. Mike Norris, we also have black police officers who turn their heads to excessive police assaults. Also, black officers have since to not shoot and kill white folks. My point to Hispanic officers' mindset. Let me get to another comment, guys. I'm sorry that didn't see all your comments come in. Kenneth Baker, he says, I'm not putting that type of power in my teenager kid's hand who still is learning himself and learning how to deal with his emotions. That's a good comment, Mr. Baker. Real good comment. Let me go back up here. We've got another comment from Mr. Baker. He says, everybody from the most senior on down were waiting for somebody else to take the lead with them. And so we've got another comment from a teacher. He says, a teacher propped the door open to turn to the car and to get their phone, or to return to the car to get their phone. So we've got another comment here from Kenneth Baker. He says, train better, unfortunately, learn from each incident and don't get complacent. There is no way to determine what city or school will be next. And you're right, Mr. Baker. Any school in any city, small or large, can be the next Uvalde, or any city can be the next Buffalo. Let me go back up here. Let me get T Swag. He's back on. You back there with us, man?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just kind of going through some of these comments that we've got in. Mike Norris said, too many of the officers, if not more than half, were Hispanic officers, which Uvalde is a predominantly large Hispanic population, if you guys didn't know, in that part of Texas. So
let me say this, man. Let's take ethnicity out of this, man. Man, and I, you know what? I'm like, Chief, man. Goodness gracious, man. You train and you train and you train and you train and you train. And, you know, I don't know, man. I'm at a loss for words. I am really at a loss for words as this continues to unfold and the things that we are learning that did not occur.
Or did it?
His lives, we'll never know now. We'll never know if, because people say, well, you could have saved life. We'll never know that now because people sit around or trying to determine, or were they afraid or whatever. But it doesn't bring those people's children back, and it doesn't eliminate the scarring that is going to happen. That's going to be lifelong, and that city will never be the same. And we can talk about Uvalde strong, and we'll come back. That city will never be the same.
Well, Keith, I don't think you heard the comment that I made earlier that one of the tragic things has come out of this mass shooting is the fact that one of the school teacher's husband died of a heart attack. So he's not there for his kids. His wife is gone. So now family members will have to raise their children. And so, you know, there is just no way a family, a community and a family can ever recover from that. That's just my personal opinion. I just don't see how a family and a community can recover from something this tragic.
No, I didn't hear that, Virgil. I didn't realize that that one of the teacher's spouses had died of a heart attack. I did not realize that, man.
Yeah.
So much
Keith,
collateral, man.
It was
so
the-
much collateral.
The female teacher, or that was killed in the shooting.
yeah. So
Yeah,
Keith, there is a video of him and I believe his father walking up to the makeshift memorial in front of the school. And this camera crew caught him putting flowers down. Soon after he left that school, he died of a heart attack. And I mean, that is, and I said this while you were offline, Keith, that as a politician, you're a man, you're a father, you're a husband before you are a Democrat or a Republican. And to sit there and think that this man died just days after his wife was murdered, or just hours, 24 hours later, and he dies from a heart attack, man, that's why I said, Keith, when you got politicians who are talking about, oh, they're going to this NRA convention in Houston, they're not doing anything they can to try to resolve. You can't fix what has already happened, but then they want to say it was a deranged 18-year-old who went in there and killed these teachers and kids. Yeah, he was. But at the same time, you had a law that allowed him to go and purchase these type of weapons.
Yeah, Virgil, it's man, you can't have it both ways. Either you're going to support the families and start doing things that are going to save lives, or you're not. So don't get on here talking about, your prayers for the families and you support the families, but you don't come up with any ideas on how to minimize this. I don't want to hear anybody else talk about they support these families and they're praying for these families that have the ability, these people that have the ability to make changes, and they're not. I don't want to hear it. It's hypocritical when they do that. I think it's lip service. I'm tired of it, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Keith, I'm reading a comment from Tony Hollis. He says, replying to Keith Baker's comment, he says, indeed, at 18-year-old, the body may have developed into manhood from a physical perspective, but the mental state of growing into a manhood is just the beginning. And so, obviously, this kid was not wrapped very well. I mean, he went on social media and kind of told some people what he was going to do. And so, Keith, it's, I don't know, man. When there should be some things in place by now to where these type of things should not be permitted on social media. And if you can put somebody in Facebook jail, you can definitely prevent somebody from going on social media talking about they're going to go, hey, I just shot my grandmother. Now I'm going to go shoot up a school. I mean, come on now. Hey, man, I just
and rip his butt.
Yeah.
Rip his butt about.
Yeah. Hey, Keith.
Social media is, we have become so.
Hey, we're having some audio trouble with Chief Swag's audio, and
Virgil?
yeah, I'm still having some trouble with your audio and video. It's kind of freezing up a little bit. Uh, but hey, Keith, man, we're coming to the last few minutes of the show, and we've got some comments I want to read here real quick before we end the show. Miss Lois Gaines, she said, "That is it. I am just sick of this." Uh, she makes another comment, says, "You can't drink or smoke at 18, but you can legally carry a weapon." And one of the last comments come in from Kenneth Baker. He says, posts and videos like those on social media should be immediately forwarded to local and federal authorities." You're right, Mr. Baker.
Hey, can you
So
hear
Keith,
Virgil?
huh?
Can you hear me?
I'm hearing you, but it's kind of freezing up.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, hey, Chiefs, man, we're at the kind of ran over our time a little bit, and I want to say, man, it's been another great show, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the podcast show. And we'll be back next week at our regular time, I believe. Chief Swag, is that going to be 6 p.m. on Thursday?
Well, I believe yes.
Okay. Well, hey guys, we just lost Chief Swag, but I tell you what, stay tuned to our Facebook page. We will definitely have updates on when our show will go live again next Thursday, either at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time or at 7 p.m. But we want to thank everybody for tuning in and joining us for another episode of You and the Law. Everybody have a great Memorial Holiday weekend and be safe. And remember to think about the families in Buffalo as well as Uvalde, Texas. And everybody have a great holiday weekend. We will see you again next Thursday on You and the Law.